The evening sky had already darkened when Elise Jenkins finally packed up her files. The office floor was nearly empty, with just the distant hum of the cleaning crew's vacuum breaking the silence. Elise rubbed her tired eyes and glanced at her watch, 9:47 p.m. Another late night, but the Henderson case wasn't going to build itself. As a federal prosecutor with the Justice Department, Elise had grown accustomed to long hours. At 34, she'd already built a solid reputation handling civil rights violations, particularly those involving law enforcement overreach. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her father had been a police officer for 30 years before retiring. "You heading out finally?" A voice called from the doorway. Elise looked up to see her colleague, Thomas, leaning against the doorframe. "Yeah, just wrapping up these witness statements for tomorrow," she replied, sliding files into her leather briefcase. "Don't work too hard." "You're already the department star," Thomas joked. Elise smiled. "Tell that to the task force committee. The quarterly review's coming up, and we still don't have enough concrete evidence on the Wilson County situation." After saying goodnight, Elise took the elevator down to the parking garage. The drive home should take about 20 minutes at this hour, just enough time to mentally shift gears before getting some much-needed rest. The roads were quiet as she drove her navy blue sedan through downtown. Spring nights were pleasant in this part of the city, and she rolled down her window slightly to enjoy the fresh air. The radio played softly, a jazz station that helped her unwind. She was about 5 minutes from her neighborhood when she noticed flashing lights in her rearview mirror. Elise checked her speedometer. She was going exactly at the limit. Maybe a taillight was out. She signaled and pulled over to the curb, turning down the radio and retrieving her license from her wallet while waiting for the officer. High beams from the police cruiser made it hard to see as a figure approached her window. Elise kept her hands visible on the steering wheel, a habit her father had drilled into her since she first started driving. A flashlight beam swept across her face as the officer reached her window. "License and registration," came a curt voice. Officer Ryan Mercer was in his mid-40s, with a stocky build and close-cropped hair beneath his police cap. His expression was stern, almost annoyed. "Good evening, officer," Elise said calmly. "May I ask what I was pulled over for?" Officer Mercer's face hardened slightly. "You were swerving between lanes. License and registration now." Elise knew she hadn't been swerving, but she kept her voice even. "My license is here," she said, slowly handing it over. "My registration is in the glove compartment. May I reach for it?" The officer took the license with a quick glance. "Go ahead, but move slowly." As Elise leaned toward the glove compartment, she noticed Officer Mercer's hand shift toward his holster. A subtle movement, but one that sent a chill through her. She carefully retrieved the registration and handed it over. "Where are you coming from at this hour?" His tone had an edge to it. "I'm coming from work, sir. I'm an attorney with the Justice Department." The officer scoffed slightly. "Right. And I'm the Attorney General." He shined his flashlight around the interior of her car, the beam lingering on her briefcase in the passenger seat. "What's in the bag?" "Just work files, officer. I really am an attorney. My credentials are in my briefcase if you'd like to see them." "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am." His tone had shifted from dismissive to commanding. Elise felt her heartbeat quicken. "Officer, may I ask why? I don't understand what's happening. Step out of the vehicle now." "I'm not going to ask again." Taking a deep breath, Elise carefully opened her door and stepped out. The night air felt suddenly colder. "I'm going to need to search your vehicle," Officer Mercer stated, not meeting her eyes. "Officer, I don't consent to a search. I've done nothing wrong, and you haven't told me what law I've supposedly broken." Elise kept her voice steady, despite the growing knot in her stomach. "If you could please tell me why I was pulled over. Are you refusing a lawful order?" Officer Mercer cut her off, taking a step closer. "Because that's how people end up in trouble. I'm not refusing anything, officer. I'm simply asking for clarification. As a citizen, I have rights, and look, lady, I don't need a lecture about rights from you people." The way he emphasized "you people" made his meaning crystal clear. Elise felt a flash of anger but kept her composure. "Officer Mercer," she said, noting his name badge. "I'd like to contact your supervisor, please." His face darkened. "Oh, now you're threatening me with my supervisor?" "Turn around and put your hands behind your back." "What?" "I'm not under arrest. You are now, for resisting arrest and suspected DUI." "DUI? I haven't been drinking at all. This is ridiculous. Elise's professional composure was cracking. My credentials are right there in my briefcase. If you'd just look, Officer Mercer grabbed her arm, spinning her around roughly. I said, hands behind your back. You can tell your stories downtown. A car slowed as it passed, the driver watching the scene unfold. Officer Mercer noticed and adjusted his approach, his movements becoming more officially procedural, though no less firm. Officer, this is completely unwarranted, Elise said as she felt cold metal handcuffs clasp around her wrists. I'm an attorney with the Justice Department. I'm currently leading a federal task force on police misconduct. Please just check my credentials. Save it, he muttered, guiding her toward the patrol car. Everyone's somebody important when they're getting arrested. As she was placed in the back seat, Elise caught sight of her open car door and her belongings. My car, my belongings, we'll have it towed. Standard procedure. There was almost a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Another patrol car pulled up. Apparently, Officer Mercer had called for backup. A younger officer stepped out, looking uncertain as he approached. What have we got? The young officer asked, glancing between Mercer and Elise in the back seat. Suspected DUI, resisting arrest, possibly more, Mercer replied loudly enough for Elise to hear. Going to need to impound the vehicle. She claims she's some big-shot lawyer. The younger officer, Hayes according to his badge, peered at Elise through the window with a mix of curiosity and concern. Can you watch her while I do a quick search? Mercer asked. Officer Hayes nodded, moving to stand near the patrol car door while Mercer returned to Elise's sedan. Through the window, Elise could see him rifling through her belongings, opening her briefcase. Officer Hayes, Elise called through the partially open window. I really am a federal prosecutor. My Justice Department credentials are in the front pocket of my briefcase. I was driving home from work, completely sober. This is a misunderstanding that's quickly becoming a civil rights violation. Hayes shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, I can't really discuss. Is your body cam on? Elise interrupted. Because it should be. And it should capture everything that happens tonight. Hayes touched his chest where the small camera was mounted and nodded slightly. Good, Elise continued, because when this is over, that footage is going to be very important. Across the street, more cars were slowing down. A couple had stopped entirely, people watching from a distance, some holding up phones. The situation was gathering attention. Officer Mercer returned, holding Elise's wallet and phone, but notably not her credentials. He spoke quietly to Hayes before opening the patrol car door. Found an open container in the vehicle, he announced loudly. That's absolutely false, Elise replied immediately. There was no open container in my car and you know it. This is fabricated evidence. More onlookers had gathered now. Someone called out from across the street. What's she done? Mercer ignored them, addressing Elise. We're heading to the station now. You can make your phone call when we get there. As the patrol car pulled away, Elise caught a last glimpse of her car. Door still open, interior light glowing, her briefcase now sitting on the hood. The case that contained not just her credentials, but files from her current investigation, an investigation into systematic racial profiling and misconduct in 3 police departments in the state, including, ironically, this very department. The drive to the station was tense and silent. Elise used the time to collect herself, mentally reviewing her rights and the proper procedures that should be followed. She thought of her father and what he would say about this situation. He had always told her that there were good and bad officers, just like in any profession. The badge doesn't make the person, he'd say. It just makes their actions more consequential. Through the divider, she could hear snippets of Officer Mercer's radio conversation. He was calling ahead to the station, his tone casual, almost jovial. This was clearly routine for him. The patrol car pulled into the station parking lot, and Elise steeled herself for what was coming next. This wasn't her first time in a police station, but it was certainly her first time arriving in handcuffs. As Officer Mercer opened the door and helped her out, she noticed Officer Hayes parking nearby, his expression troubled as he watched them. The fluorescent lights of the station were harsh after the darkness of the patrol car. Several officers looked up as Mercer led her through the door, curiosity in their gazes. Processing a DUI and resisting arrest, Mercer announced to the booking officer, a heavy-set woman with tired eyes. As Elise was led to the booking desk, she made eye contact with a sergeant standing near the hallway. He was older, With graying hair and a serious expression, something in his gaze told her he might be someone who would listen. "I need to speak with a supervisor," Elise said clearly. "My name is Elise Jenkins. I'm a federal prosecutor with the Justice Department, and this arrest is completely unwarranted and potentially illegal." The room didn't exactly fall silent, but there was a noticeable pause in activity. The sergeant stepped forward. "I'm Sergeant Powell. What seems to be the issue here?" Before Elise could respond, Officer Mercer cut in. "Sir, this woman was driving erratically, refused to comply with orders, and had an open container in her vehicle. Standard procedure." Sergeant Powell looked between them, his expression neutral. "And you checked her ID thoroughly?" "Yes, sir. Just another perp claiming to be important." Elise met the sergeant's eyes directly. "My Justice Department credentials are in my briefcase, which Officer Mercer left on the hood of my car. I was driving completely normally and have had nothing to drink. The open container claim is fabricated. This entire stop appears to have been motivated by racial bias, and I'd like to file a formal complaint," Mercer scoffed. But Sergeant Powell's expression remained serious. "That's a significant allegation," the sergeant said carefully. "Officer Hayes, you were on scene as well?" Hayes, who had just entered the station, looked uncomfortably between Mercer and the sergeant. "Yes, sir. I arrived as backup after the initial stop. And the body cam footage? Should be complete, sir." Sergeant Powell nodded slowly. "Let's verify the lady's identity before proceeding further." He turned to Elise. "Ma'am, is there someone who can confirm who you are?" As Elise began to respond, the station doors opened again. A tow truck driver entered carrying a familiar leather briefcase. "Found this on a car hood I'm supposed to impound," he said, holding up the briefcase. "Figured it might be important." All eyes turned to the tow truck driver standing in the doorway, Elise's leather briefcase dangling from his hand. "That's my briefcase," Elise said clearly, looking directly at Sergeant Powell. "My Justice Department credentials are in the front pocket." Officer Mercer stepped forward quickly. "I'll take that as evidence," he said, reaching for the briefcase. "Actually," Sergeant Powell interrupted, his voice firm but calm, "I'll handle this." He took the briefcase from the tow truck driver with a nod of thanks. "Continue with the processing, Officer Mercer. I'll verify the contents myself." Mercer's jaw tightened, but he said nothing as Powell walked away with the briefcase, heading toward a small office at the back of the room. The booking officer, who had been watching the scene unfold with increasing interest, turned back to her computer. "Name?" she asked Elise, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Elise Jenkins," she replied, still wearing handcuffs behind her back. "And I'd like to make my phone call as soon as possible." The officer nodded, typing. "Date of birth?" As Elise answered the standard booking questions, she kept glancing toward the office where Sergeant Powell had disappeared with her briefcase. Officer Mercer stood nearby, his arms crossed, occasionally checking his watch. Officer Hayes had positioned himself near the coffee machine, pretending to be busy but clearly watching the situation. "Stand against the wall for your photo," the booking officer instructed after a few minutes. Elise complied, facing the camera with a level gaze. The flash went off, momentarily blinding her. As her vision cleared, she saw Sergeant Powell emerging from the office, her briefcase in one hand and something small and official-looking in the other. His expression had changed. There was a new tension in his face as he approached. "Officer Mercer," he called, his voice crisp. "A word, please." Mercer sauntered over, confidence still evident in his posture. The two men spoke in hushed tones, but Elise could see Powell showing Mercer the item from her briefcase, her Justice Department credentials, complete with federal badge. Mercer's face went through a series of rapid changes, disbelief, then alarm, and finally a forced neutral expression that didn't quite mask his unease. "Remove the handcuffs," Sergeant Powell ordered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Sir, the processing isn't complete, and the suspect—" "Ms. Jenkins is not a suspect," Powell cut in sharply. "Remove the handcuffs now and then report to my office." The room had gone completely quiet. Even the dispatcher in the corner had stopped mid-sentence on her radio call. Everyone was watching as Mercer reluctantly took out his keys and removed Elise's handcuffs. Elise rubbed her wrists, relief washing over her, though her expression remained professional. "Ms. Jenkins," Sergeant Powell said, his tone now respectful, "I apologize for this situation. Would you come with me, please? You can make your phone call from my office." As they walked away from the booking area, Elise could feel the stares of every officer in the room. Officer Hayes looked particularly troubled, while Mercer stood rigid, his face flushed with what might have been anger or embarrassment. Or both. Sergeant Powell's office was small but orderly. He closed the door behind them and gestured to a chair across from his desk. "I apologize again for what happened tonight," he began, placing her briefcase on the desk between them. "Your credentials are in order. You're with the Civil Rights Division, I see." "Yes," Elise confirmed, settling into the chair. "I lead the Police Misconduct Task Force for this region." Powell's expression tightened slightly. "I see, that's quite a coincidence, is it?" Elise asked quietly. The sergeant sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Ms. Jenkins, I want to be clear that what happened tonight does not represent our department's policies or values. Officer Mercer's conduct will be thoroughly investigated. I appreciate that, Sergeant, but this isn't just about one officer's behavior." Elise leaned forward. "My task force has been investigating multiple departments in this region for patterns of racial profiling and procedural violations. Tonight I experienced it firsthand." Powell nodded slowly. "I understand. The phone is there if you'd like to make your call." He stood up. "I'll give you some privacy and then we can discuss next steps." After Powell left, Elise took a moment to collect herself. Her hands were steady as she picked up the phone, but her heart was still racing. She dialed a familiar number. "Director Wilson speaking." The voice on the other end was sharp, professional. "Director, it's Elise Jenkins." She kept her voice even despite the emotions churning inside her. "I've had an incident that relates directly to our current investigation." 20 minutes later, the station was in a state of controlled chaos. Director Wilson had made several calls, including one directly to the police commissioner. Sergeant Powell had reviewed the body cam footage from both Officer Mercer and Officer Hayes, his expression growing grimmer with each passing minute. Elise sat in a conference room now, a cup of untouched coffee in front of her. The door opened, and Police Captain Gerald Rivera entered, his uniform crisp despite the late hour. "Ms. Jenkins," he said, offering his hand. "I'm Captain Rivera. I want to personally apologize for what happened tonight." Elise shook his hand but didn't smile. "Captain, I appreciate the sentiment, but I think we both know this goes beyond a simple apology." Rivera nodded, sitting down across from her. "Yes, it does. I've reviewed the preliminary evidence, including the body cam footage. Officer Mercer's conduct was completely unacceptable. He's been placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation." "And the fabricated evidence? The alleged open container?" The captain's face tightened. "We found no open container in your vehicle." "That allegation appears to have been falsified." Elise wasn't surprised, but hearing the confirmation still sent a wave of anger through her. "Captain, as you're probably aware, my task force has been investigating patterns of misconduct in several departments, including yours." "Yes, I was informed of that about 10 minutes ago." Rivera's tone was carefully neutral. "A rather uncomfortable coincidence. Or perhaps not a coincidence at all," Elise suggested. "There have been rumors that some officers were tipped off about our investigation. Tonight's incident makes me wonder if Officer Mercer recognized my name when he ran my license." The door opened again, and Officer Hayes entered, looking nervous. "You wanted to see me, Captain?" "Yes, Hayes. Ms. Jenkins has some questions for you." Elise studied the young officer. He couldn't have been more than 26 or 27, his uniform still looking relatively new. "Officer Hayes, you arrived as backup after I was already in custody, correct?" "Yes, ma'am," he confirmed, standing at attention. "And what did Officer Mercer tell you about the situation?" Hayes glanced at the captain, who nodded for him to answer. "He said you were pulled over for erratic driving and became confrontational. He mentioned suspicion of DUI. Was I acting intoxicated in any way when you saw me?" "No, ma'am," Hayes admitted. "You seemed upset but clear-headed." "And did Officer Mercer find an open container in my vehicle while you were present?" Hayes hesitated, then shook his head. "I didn't see him find anything like that. He searched the vehicle after I arrived to watch you in the patrol car." "Thank you for your honesty," Elise said. "One more question. Has Officer Mercer ever made comments about race in your presence, either about suspects or citizens in general?" The young officer's discomfort was visible. I don't think I should." "It's okay, Hayes," Captain Rivera interjected. "Answer truthfully." Hayes took a deep breath. "Yes, ma'am. He's made comments. Nothing specifically about tonight, but yes, he's made comments before. After Hayes was dismissed, Elise turned back to the captain. I want copies of all body cam footage, the dispatch logs, and the initial report that Officer Mercer filed. Of course, Rivera agreed quickly. We'll cooperate fully with your investigation. I appreciate that, Captain, but I should be clear. This isn't just about Officer Mercer anymore. Elise's voice was firm. Tonight's incident will be included in our larger investigation into departmental patterns and practices. One officer's actions often reflect deeper issues within the system. Rivera nodded, his expression resigned. I understand. For what it's worth, I've been pushing for more comprehensive bias training for the past year. But budget constraints have been an issue. Well, Captain, after tonight, I think you might find those budget constraints suddenly loosening up. Elise stood. Now I'd like to retrieve my personal belongings and have someone drive me to my vehicle, assuming it hasn't been impounded yet. As she gathered her things at the front desk, Elise noticed Officer Mercer in a room across the hall, slumped in a chair as Sergeant Powell spoke to him, gesturing emphatically. Mercer's face was a mix of defiance and worry. Officer Hayes approached, car keys in hand. I've been asked to drive you back to your vehicle, ma'am. The ride was mostly silent, both of them processing the night's events in their own ways. As they approached her sedan, still parked where she'd left it, Hayes finally spoke. Ms. Jenkins, I want you to know that not all of us are like Mercer. Some of us joined to actually protect and serve. Elise studied him for a moment. I know that, Officer Hayes. My father was a cop for 30 years. He taught me that the badge doesn't make the person, it just makes their actions more consequential. Hayes nodded, considering her words. Your father sounds wise. He was. Elise opened the door to step out. By the way, your decision to preserve that body cam footage was the right one. It takes courage to hold your colleagues accountable. It doesn't feel like courage, Hayes admitted. It feels like I betrayed the Brotherhood. The real betrayal would be staying silent when you see injustice, especially from those sworn to prevent it. Elise handed him her card. If you ever want to talk more about reforming the system from within, call me. We need good officers like you to be part of the solution. As Hayes drove away, Elise sat in her car for a long moment, the events of the night washing over her. What had happened to her tonight happened to countless others who didn't have federal badges or task force positions, people who had no recourse when their rights were violated. She started her car, determination replacing her earlier anger and fear. Tonight hadn't just been a personal affront, it had been a stark reminder of why her work mattered. And tomorrow that work would continue with renewed purpose. As she drove home through the quiet streets, her phone rang. It was Director Wilson calling back. Are you okay? He asked when she answered. Yes, Elise replied, her voice stronger than before, and ready to get back to work. Morning sunlight streamed through the blinds as Elise reviewed her notes at the kitchen table. She had managed only a few hours of sleep after last night's incident, but adrenaline and determination kept her focused. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing with messages and calls since dawn. News traveled fast in both law enforcement and legal circles. The coffee maker beeped, and Elise poured herself a second cup, wincing slightly at the tenderness around her wrists where the handcuffs had been too tight. A small price to pay, she thought, compared to what others experienced in similar situations without her resources or position. Her doorbell rang at precisely 8 a.m. Thomas, her colleague from the Justice Department, stood on her porch holding a leather messenger bag and wearing a concerned expression. You look terrible, he said as she opened the door, then immediately grimaced. Sorry, that came out wrong. Are you okay? Elise managed a tired smile. I've been better. Come in. Thomas followed her to the kitchen, setting his bag on a chair. Director Wilson filled me in this morning. The whole office is talking about it. He shook his head. I still can't believe it happened to you of all people. Why not me? Elise asked, sliding a mug of coffee toward him. Being a federal prosecutor doesn't make me immune to racial profiling. If anything, this just confirms what we've been investigating for months. Thomas nodded soberly. The director wants you to take some time off, by the way. Not happening, Elise replied immediately. We have too much work to do, and now we have fresh evidence. Speaking of evidence, Thomas unzipped his bag and pulled out a USB drive. I picked this up on my way here. Complete body cam footage from both officers last night, plus the dispatch recordings. Elise took the drive, turning it over in her hand. That was fast. Usually, departments drag their feet on releasing footage. Amazing how quickly things happen when the Civil Rights Division is breathing down their necks. Thomas sipped his coffee. Plus, I think Captain Rivera is genuinely trying to get ahead of this. Elise's laptop was already open on the table. She plugged in the drive and clicked through the files. Let's see exactly what we're dealing with. The footage was even worse than she remembered. From Officer Mercer's perspective, his bias was clear from the moment he approached her vehicle. His tone, his posture, the unnecessary escalation, it all pointed to a pattern of behavior rather than an isolated incident. Most revealing were the moments when Mercer returned to his patrol car before calling for backup. His dashboard camera captured him running Elise's license and then making a phone call. "You getting this?" he said to someone on the other end. "Jenkins." "Yeah, same one. I've got her pulled over right now." "Yeah, I'm handling it." Elise and Thomas exchanged glances. "He knew who you were," Thomas said quietly. "And someone told him to handle it," Elise added, her suspicions confirmed. This goes beyond one officer with bias issues. They continued watching as the footage showed Hayes arriving, the search of Elise's car, and the trip to the station. Hayes's footage provided another angle, capturing moments when Mercer thought no one was watching, including him slipping something into the back seat of Elise's car while Hayes was distracted. "There's your open container," Thomas pointed out. "Plant evidence, make a false arrest, discredit the investigator. Classic intimidation tactic. And completely backfired," Elise added, pausing the video. "We need to find out who was on the other end of that call." The rest of the morning passed in a flurry of activity. Director Wilson arrived at Elise's house with 2 more members of their task force, turning her dining room into an impromptu command center. Phone records were subpoenaed, witness statements were collected from officers at the station, and the investigation expanded beyond Officer Mercer to include potential conspiracy charges. By noon, Elise's incident had made local news. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Just saw the news. Call me right away." Stepping onto the back porch for privacy, Elise called home. Her mother answered on the first ring. "Are you all right?" The worry in her mother's voice was palpable. "The news is saying you were wrongfully arrested." "I'm fine, Mom," Elise assured her. "A bit shaken up, but I'm okay." "Your father would be absolutely furious if he were here." Her mother's voice caught slightly. Elise's father had passed away 2 years ago, but his presence still loomed large in their lives. "Is this related to your task force work?" "It looks that way," Elise admitted, "but it's actually helpful for our case. We now have concrete evidence of exactly what we've been investigating." Her mother sighed, always finding the silver lining. "Just like your father." There was a pause. "He would be so proud of you, you know. Not just for your work, but for how you're handling this." Emotion welled up unexpectedly in Elise's throat. "Thanks, Mom. That means a lot." After promising to visit soon, Elise ended the call and took a moment to compose herself before heading back inside. The brief conversation had grounded her, reminding her of the deeper purpose behind her work. In the dining room, the team was gathered around Thomas's laptop. "You need to see this," he said as Elise entered. On the screen was a news clip from a local station. The reporter stood outside the police department where Elise had been taken the night before. Sources inside the department claim this may be part of a larger pattern of misconduct. Officer Ryan Mercer, who made the arrest, has had 3 previous complaints filed against him for alleged racial profiling, though all were dismissed during internal reviews. The camera switched to show Officer Hayes being interviewed in civilian clothes. His face solemn. "I couldn't stay silent," he was saying. "What happened last night was wrong, and it wasn't an isolated incident. I've seen similar situations before but never spoke up." "That ends today." Elise stared at the screen in surprise. "He went public already?" Director Wilson nodded, looking impressed. "Brave young man. He's risking his career. Or starting a better one," Elise replied. "The department can't touch him now without it looking like retaliation against a whistleblower." The story continued to unfold throughout the afternoon. Phone records revealed that Officer Mercer had indeed called someone after running Elise's license, Lieutenant Gregory Dawson, who oversaw internal affairs at the department and who had personally dismissed 2 of the previous complaints against Mercer. By early evening, Both Mercer and Dawson had been placed on administrative leave pending further investigation. The police commissioner had scheduled a press conference for the following morning, and the mayor's office had reached out to the Justice Department about cooperation. Elise sat at her kitchen island, reviewing the day's developments while the task force team packed up their materials. What had started as a personal ordeal was rapidly expanding into exactly the kind of case they had been building for months. "You know," Thomas said, closing his laptop, "most people would be traumatized after being wrongfully arrested. You seem almost energized by it." Elise considered this. "I'm not saying it wasn't frightening in the moment, it was. But this is why I became a prosecutor in the first place, to address systemic issues in the justice system." "Still," Thomas pressed, "it's personal now." "That's different." "It's always been personal," Elise corrected him. "My father spent his career trying to be one of the good ones, fighting the system from within. I'm just continuing that fight from a different angle." After the team left, Elise's house fell quiet. She should have felt exhausted, but her mind was still racing. She opened her father's old journal, which she kept in her desk drawer. He had documented his own struggles within the police force, the subtle and not-so-subtle racism he had witnessed over 3 decades of service. One entry from 15 years ago stood out. "Hardest part isn't facing the bad cops. It's confronting the good ones who stay silent." Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. "It was Officer Hayes, Miss Jenkins," he began, his voice tentative. "I hope it's okay that I'm calling. I got your number from Captain Rivera." "Of course," Elise assured him. "I saw your interview on the news." "That took courage." "That's actually why I'm calling," Hayes explained. "After I spoke to the press, 3 other officers reached out to me. They have stories similar to what happened to you, incidents involving Mercer and others. They want to come forward, but they're scared. I told them they should talk to you directly." Elise sat up straighter, grabbing a notepad. "That would be extremely helpful. When can they meet?" "That's the thing," Hayes continued. "They'll only meet somewhere private, not at the Justice Department offices. They're worried about being seen." "I understand," Elise replied. "We can arrange a secure location. Their safety and confidentiality will be protected." After making arrangements for a meeting the following evening, Elise hung up, her mind already formulating next steps. One officer coming forward was notable. 4 officers painting the same picture of departmental misconduct was a pattern that couldn't be ignored. Her phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "Turn on Channel 8 now." Elise grabbed the remote and switched on the TV. A breaking news banner scrolled across the screen as the anchor spoke. "Exclusive footage of the wrongful arrest of Federal Prosecutor Elise Jenkins has been obtained by Channel 8 News. Viewers should be aware that the following video contains disturbing content and language." Screen switched to bodycam footage, the same footage Elise had reviewed that morning. Someone had leaked it to the press. As she watched her own arrest play out for all to see, Elise felt a strange mix of emotions. There was violation in having such a personal, frightening moment broadcast publicly, but there was also power in the exposure. Now everyone could see what had happened, not just to her but by extension to countless others without her platform or voice. Her phone began ringing nonstop as the footage aired. Colleagues, friends, reporters, all wanting statements or reactions. Elise let the calls go to voicemail, watching the broadcast in silence. Sometimes change required public pressure, and while she hadn't sought this spotlight, she would use it to push for the reforms that were long overdue. The news anchor returned to the screen. "We've reached out to the police department for comment on this footage. Meanwhile, the Justice Department has confirmed that this incident is now part of a larger federal investigation into patterns of misconduct within the department." Elise turned off the TV and took a deep breath. Tomorrow would bring a new wave of challenges, but tonight had brought something unexpected: momentum. What had happened to her was now impossible to ignore or dismiss, and neither was the broader issue it represented. She picked up her phone and began returning calls, starting with the one from Director Wilson. There was work to do. The community center was quiet at 8 p.m., most of its daily activities long finished. Elise had chosen it carefully, neutral ground in a neighborhood far enough from the police department to make the officers comfortable, but public enough to feel safe for everyone. She sat at a table in a back room, arranging files while Thomas set up a recording device. "Are you sure about this?" Thomas asked, checking the recorder's battery. We could have brought more security. Elise shook her head. These officers are already nervous. The more official this looks, the less likely they'll speak freely. The past 36 hours had been a whirlwind. The leaked body cam footage had gone viral, drawing national attention. The police commissioner's press conference that morning had been tense, with promises of a thorough investigation and full cooperation with federal authorities. That sounded hollow against the backdrop of such clear evidence. Elise had spent most of the day fielding calls from the mayor's office, from civil rights organizations, from journalists. She declined all interview requests for now, focusing instead on the investigation. Tonight's meeting with the officers who'd reached out to Hayes could be crucial. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Hayes entered first, dressed in civilian clothes, followed by 3 other officers, 2 men and 1 woman, all looking varying degrees of nervous. Ms. Jenkins, this is Officer Chen, Officer Rodriguez, and Officer Dawkins, Hayes said, closing the door behind them. They all work different shifts and precincts, but they've all had experiences they think you should know about. Elise stood, offering her hand to each. Thank you for coming. I know this isn't easy. Easier than staying silent any longer. Officer Chen replied quietly. She was the youngest of the 3, probably in her late 20s, especially after seeing what happened to you. They settled around the table, the tension in the room palpable. Elise explained the recording device and their rights as whistleblowers before opening the floor. Who wants to start? Officer Rodriguez leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly. I've been on the force for 12 years. For the past 3, I've been keeping my own records of what I've seen. Traffic stops that didn't add up. Arrests that seemed targeted. Evidence that appeared too conveniently. He slid a thumb drive across the table. It's all here, dates, badge numbers, incidents. I never knew what to do with it until now. Why didn't you report it through official channels? Thomas asked. Rodriguez gave him a look that suggested the answer should be obvious. Internal Affairs is headed by Dawson, the same guy who was on the phone with Mercer the night you were arrested, he explained to Elise. Nothing ever sticks. Complaints disappear or get dismissed. Officers who speak up get the worst shifts, dangerous assignments, or find themselves under investigation for minor infractions. Officer Dawkins nodded in agreement. I filed a formal complaint last year after witnessing Mercer and 2 others use excessive force during an arrest in the West Side neighborhood. 3 weeks later, my locker was searched during a random drug check, and I was written up for an incomplete report from 2 months prior. The retaliation isn't always obvious, Officer Chen added. Sometimes it's subtle. Backup that arrives a little too late when you call for it, paperwork that goes missing, rumors that start circulating about you. As the evening progressed, a clear picture emerged. What had happened to Elise wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern that had existed for years. Mercer was a problem, but he was protected by a network that included Lieutenant Dawson and at least 2 other senior officers. Together, they had created a culture of silence and fear. What made you decide to come forward now? Elise asked as the conversation began to wind down. Your credentials, Officer Chen answered simply. When you were arrested, you were just another black woman to Mercer. But when they found out who you were, she trailed off. Suddenly there were consequences, Dawkins finished for her. For the first time, someone with real power experienced what we've been seeing happen to regular citizens for years. And Hayes had the courage to speak up first, Rodriguez added, nodding toward the young officer. Showed the rest of us it could be done. Hayes looked down, seemingly uncomfortable with the praise. I just did what was right. After the officers left, Elise and Thomas remained behind, reviewing their notes. This is bigger than we thought, Thomas said, still processing everything they'd heard. And exactly what we need for our case, Elise replied. Personal testimony documentation patterns across multiple precincts. This strengthens our position significantly. The question is, how high does it go? Thomas wondered. Dawson is mid-level management. Is he the top, or are there others above him involved?
We'll find out, Elise said firmly.
Now that we have these officers' cooperation, we can... Her phone rang, interrupting her. It was Director Wilson. Turn on the news, he said without preamble when she answered. Back at her apartment, Elise and Thomas watched the breaking news report in stunned silence. Lieutenant Dawson had called a press conference of his own, without departmental approval. Standing in front of the police headquarters, he read from a prepared statement. The allegations against Officer Mercer and myself are part of a politically motivated witch hunt, he declared, cameras flashing around him. Federal prosecutors are overreaching their authority and using isolated incidents to paint our entire department as corrupt. I categorically deny any wrongdoing and will fight these baseless accusations. The reporter continued. Sources inside the department say Lieutenant Dawson has been placed on administrative leave for holding this unauthorized press conference. Meanwhile, the police commissioner has scheduled an emergency meeting with the mayor's office tomorrow morning. Elise muted the TV, turning to Thomas. He's panicking. Good, Thomas replied. Panicking people make mistakes. This unauthorized press conference is already one of them. The next morning dawned with a fresh wave of developments. Elise arrived at the Justice Department offices early, only to find Director Wilson waiting for her. The commissioner wants to meet, he said, handing her a coffee. Just you and me, no other staff. He says he wants to find a path forward. Elise raised an eyebrow. Sounds like damage control. Undoubtedly, Wilson agreed. But it also sounds like an opportunity. The meeting's at 10. That gives us 2 hours to prepare our approach. They spent those hours reviewing the evidence they'd gathered, the body cam footage, Officer Rodriguez's documentation, the witness statements, phone records showing Mercer's call to Dawson. It wasn't just about Elise's wrongful arrest anymore. It was about years of systematic misconduct. The commissioner's office was in the city's downtown government building, a large corner room with windows overlooking the park. Commissioner Howard Baldwin was in his early 60s, with silver hair and the weathered look of someone who'd spent decades in public service. Director Wilson, Ms. Jenkins, he greeted them, his handshake firm. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Of course, Wilson replied. Though I must say I'm curious about the timing. Baldwin gestured to chairs across from his desk. Let's not dance around it. The situation has become untenable. Lieutenant Dawson's unauthorized press conference last night was the final straw for the mayor. She's demanding action, and frankly, so am I. What kind of action? Police asked directly. A full house cleaning, Baldwin said, surprising both of them with his bluntness. I've been commissioner for 8 months. I inherited a department with deep-seated issues that I've been trying to address gradually. But after what happened to you, Ms. Jenkins, and what we've learned since, it's clear that gradual change isn't enough. Elise studied him, looking for signs of insincerity. With all due respect, Commissioner, why should we believe this isn't just more damage control? Baldwin nodded as if he'd expected the question. Because I'm not just offering words. I'm offering full cooperation with your investigation and immediate action on our end. He slid a folder across the desk. This is a list of 5 officers, including Mercer and Dawson, who are being terminated effective immediately, not just placed on leave. It's also a request for the Justice Department to oversee a complete overhaul of our internal affairs procedures and training programs. Director Wilson opened the folder, scanning its contents. This is incomprehensive. It needs to be, Baldwin replied simply. What happened to Ms. Jenkins was inexcusable, but it's also forced us to confront problems we've been avoiding for too long. I'd rather be the commissioner who fixed the department than the one who presided over its disgrace. The meeting continued for over an hour, with specific discussions about oversight, reform measures, and cooperation between the department and the Justice Department task force. By the time they left, a framework for real change was taking shape. Outside the government building, Elise and Wilson paused on the steps. What do you think? Wilson asked. Was that genuine? Elise considered the question. I think it was practical. Baldwin sees which way the wind is blowing, but practical can work in our favor if we keep the pressure on. Wilson nodded in agreement. The real work is just beginning. We'll need to monitor implementation, follow up on the other officers involved, make sure these reforms actually happen. And make sure this isn't just about one department, Elise added. Our investigation covered 3 departments in the region. The others will be watching how this plays out. As they walked toward the parking lot, Elise's phone buzzed with a text from Hayes. Just heard about the terminations. The station is buzzing. Change is actually happening. Thank you. It was a small victory in a much larger battle, but it felt significant. For the first time since her arrest, Elise allowed herself a moment of cautious optimism. That evening, she visited her mother for dinner, bringing the day's newspapers with their front-page coverage of the unfolding story. "Your father would be so proud," her mother said again as they cleared the dishes. "But he'd also tell you to be careful. People who've held power for a long time don't give it up easily." "I know, Mom," Elise assured her. "Believe me, I know this isn't over. It's just beginning." On the drive home, Elise's thoughts returned to her father's journal and his words about confronting the good officers who stay silent. Thanks to Hayes and the others who'd come forward, that silence was finally breaking, and with it, the possibility of real change was emerging. 6 months had passed since that night when Elise was wrongfully arrested. The summer heat had given way to fall crispness, and the city had changed in subtle but significant ways. Standing at the podium in the community center auditorium, Elise looked out at the diverse crowd gathered for the town hall meeting and felt a sense of cautious accomplishment. "When we began this journey," she said into the microphone, "many people doubted that real change was possible. Police departments have long been resistant to outside oversight, but tonight I'm proud to share the progress we've made together." Behind her on the stage sat Commissioner Baldwin, Mayor Wilson, Director Thomas, recently promoted after Director Wilson's retirement, and Officer Hayes, who now headed the department's newly formed Community Accountability Unit. The audience included community members, activists, officers in uniform and plainclothes, and several journalists. "Over the past 6 months," Elise continued, "we've implemented comprehensive reforms in 3 police departments across our region. These include mandatory bias training for all officers, new oversight procedures for arrests and use of force incidents, body cameras that cannot be turned off during interactions with the public, and most importantly, a completely restructured complaint process that ensures citizen concerns are heard and addressed fairly." She gestured to the screen behind her, where data points were displayed. "Already we're seeing results. Complaints of racial profiling have decreased by 32%. Arrests for minor infractions in minority neighborhoods have dropped by 45%. And community satisfaction with police interactions has improved across all demographics." What Elise didn't mention was the personal cost of these changes, the death threats that had come to her office, the lawsuit that Mercer had filed against her, claiming defamation, quickly dismissed by a judge, the stress that had kept her awake many nights as they fought opposition from the police union and certain community leaders who claimed they were handcuffing the police. Instead, she focused on the victories, both public and private. The case against Mercer and Dawson had been settled, with both men not only losing their jobs but facing criminal charges for evidence tampering and civil rights violations. Officers Rodriguez, Chen, and Dawkins had been promoted, serving as examples that speaking up against misconduct would be rewarded, not punished. And Hayes had become a respected leader in the department, implementing many of the reforms that Elise had proposed. After the presentations and a lively Q&A session, the formal meeting ended and the room transitioned to casual conversations. Elise found herself approached by a middle-aged woman with a warm smile. "Ms. Jenkins? I'm Patricia Washington. My son was stopped by police 2 years ago and roughed up pretty badly for fitting a description." Officer Mercer was one of the officers involved. Elise nodded, having heard many similar stories during her investigation. "I just wanted to thank you," Patricia continued. "We filed complaints, we spoke at city council meetings, we did everything we could, but nothing changed. It took someone like you experiencing it firsthand for people to finally listen." The woman's words landed heavily on Elise. "I wish it hadn't taken that," she said honestly. "Your son's experience should have been enough." "But it wasn't," Patricia replied simply. "And instead of just going on with your life after it happened to you, you used your position to make changes that will help people like my son. That matters." As Patricia walked away, Elise felt a tap on her shoulder. It was Hayes, now a sergeant after his recent promotion. "Got a minute?" he asked, gesturing toward a quieter corner of the room. They found 2 empty chairs near a window overlooking the community center's playground, now empty in the evening darkness. "How are you holding up with all the changes?" Elise asked. Hayes smiled. "Better than expected. There's still resistance, sure. Some of the older officers especially think we're overreacting, but most of the department is adapting well. The new recruits are coming in with a completely different mindset. And you? No regrets about becoming the face of reform?" He considered the question seriously. "No regrets. But I do think about how close I came to staying silent that night. If I hadn't spoken up about what I saw— But you did, Elise reminded him. That's what matters. Hayes nodded, then reached into his jacket pocket. Actually, I wanted to show you something. He pulled out a small notebook. My father was a cop in Detroit for 25 years. He gave me this when I graduated from the academy. He handed her the notebook, opened to a page with a handwritten quote. The job isn't just about enforcing the law. It's about serving justice. Sometimes those are the same thing. Sometimes they're not. Your father sounds like a wise man, Elise said, handing the notebook back. Reminds me of mine. That's actually why I wanted to talk to you, Hayes continued. The department's implementing that mentorship program you suggested, pairing veteran officers with new recruits, focusing on community-centered policing. I've been asked to help develop the curriculum. I was hoping you might be willing to consult on it. Elise felt a genuine smile spread across her face. I'd be honored. Their conversation was interrupted by Thomas, who approached with an urgent expression. Elise, you should know, Dawson just accepted a plea deal. He's agreed to testify against the others. Others? Hayes asked. Thomas nodded. 2 captains and a deputy chief from the other departments in our investigation. Dawson claims they were all part of an unofficial network that protected officers like Mercer and suppressed complaints. Elise exchanged a glance with Hayes. This was bigger than they'd initially thought, extending to the highest levels of multiple departments. We still have a lot of work to do, she said quietly. Later that evening, as the town hall wrapped up, Elise found herself standing alone outside the community center. The night was cool, stars visible above despite the city lights. She thought about how much had changed since that traffic stop 6 months ago, and how much still needed to change. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Saw you on the local news. So proud. Dad would be too. As she was about to reply, a group of young police cadets exited the building. They were part of the new recruiting class, the first to go through the reformed training program. They noticed her and paused, uncertain. One of them, a young woman, stepped forward. Miss Jenkins? We just wanted to say thank you. We joined the force to make a difference, and your work is helping make that possible. Elise looked at their fresh faces, full of idealism and purpose. Thank you for choosing this path, she replied. It's not an easy one. Neither is yours, the cadet responded. But necessary things rarely are. After they left, Elise drove to the cemetery where her father was buried. It was closed for the night, but she parked outside the gates, looking in at the peaceful grounds illuminated by moonlight. We're making progress, Dad, she said softly. Not as fast as I'd like, but it's happening. The next morning, Elise arrived at her office early. A stack of files awaited her review. Cases from other cities where similar patterns had emerged following the publicity of her case. Requests for guidance on implementing reforms. Invitations to speak at law enforcement academies and community organizations. Thomas knocked on her open door, coffee in hand. Ready for today? The Oversight Committee meeting is at 10 and the mayor wants to discuss expanding the reforms to county sheriff departments. I'm ready. Elise nodded, taking the coffee. But first I need to finish the policy recommendations for the training program. Hayes is waiting on them. You know, Thomas said, leaning against the doorframe. When this all started with your arrest, I never imagined it would lead to such sweeping changes. Elise thought about Patricia Washington's son, about the cadets from last night, about Hayes and his father's notebook. One incident doesn't create change, she said thoughtfully. But it can be the catalyst that ignites what was already building. All the frustration, all the evidence, all the voices that weren't being heard, sometimes it just takes one undeniable moment to bring it all together. Well, your undeniable moment is changing how policing works in this region, Thomas replied, and other cities are starting to take notice. As Thomas left, Elise turned to the window, watching the city come alive in the morning light. The work was far from over. Reform wasn't a destination, but a continuous process of improvement, accountability, and rebuilding trust. There would be setbacks and resistance. Some days would feel like fighting an immovable system, but looking at the community outside, people going about their daily lives, expecting and deserving equal protection under the law, she felt renewed determination. What had happened to her that night wasn't just about one racist cop or one wrongful arrest. It was about a system that had allowed such behavior to flourish unchecked for too long. Now that system was changing, step by step. Not because she was special or had power that others didn't, but because when her moment came, she'd chosen to use it not just for herself, but for everyone who'd faced similar injustice without her platform or voice. She turned back to her desk and opened the first file of the day. There was still so much to do, but for the first time in a long time the path forward was clear. And she wasn't walking it alone.